Previously on Stupid Things People Do and what we can learn from them, we unpacked investigations and how you need to do them, cause not doing them can make your organization pop like so much bubble wrap in the hands of an angry giant. Today, we're going to be talking about exactly what an investigation can look like. This isn't legal advice. This is Stupid Things People Do and what we can learn from them. So think of this as more of a, here's what you can be talking about with counsel more than a, go out and do this right away. Right. Now that disclaimers are out of the way, what's the big idea? Well, as I said, we talked about investigations and how not doing them is bad. And sitting on the outside of these organizations, we can eat popcorn and laugh at all the chumps rocketing their organization straight into the Athenosphere. But here's the thing. That could just as easily be any of us if we don't have a predefined set of investigative policies. A framework, if you will. So, for example, let's take a look at this IHop restaurant I read about in Wisconsin. IHop restaurant. International House of Pancakes. It's basically Disneyland for your tummy. It should be a place of wonder, excitement, and oh so many happy carbohydrates. Unfortunately, in the case of this IHop, the manager decided that this should not be the case for his female teenage employees. Let's call these employees Kate and Kat, because that's not going to get confusing at all. Anyway, Kate and Kat were relentlessly propositioned by their manager, and they were inappropriately touched when they resisted Creepo's advances, and Creepo is his official name now for the purposes of this vlog. Anyway, when they resisted his advances, Creepo retaliated against them by yelling at them and giving them much harder tasks. So yes, this is exactly the kind of behavior that we're looking at when we're looking at what should trigger an investigation. So surely that is what happened, right? Well, no, because this is stupid things people do, not semi-intelligent things people do. See, these teenagers appealed their situation to their general manager, a woman who we will call Karen for the purposes of this conversation. According to the restaurant's harassment policy, Karen is the one who should have been responsible for escalating to upper management. However, this was a Karen. So, instead of taking the girls' claims seriously, she dismissed them, calling them silly girls for being so concerned. So, the investigation got Karen into nothingness, and Kate and Kat were thrust back into the horrid predatory environment. Of course, these situations don't just not escalate, and escalate it did. When Kate was fired, her attorney is the one who launched an investigation. And that is really not how you want an investigation to get spun up. Upon hearing about the investigation, Creepo quit. And the IHop district manager, who for the purposes of this vlog we will call Tony Stark, began his own investigation. And again, counter-investigating because you are being investigated, that is not a great prize. Ultimately, Tony Stark discovered Karen's Karening, and he fired Karen. But by then, the damage was already done. So let's zoom back out. We have three big questions in play at this point in the story, and IHop literally got every single one of those answers wrong. 1, what kind of misconduct will require an investigation? 2, who gets to decide when an investigation is triggered? 3, who is actually responsible for conducting that investigation? In our IHop restaurant example, they did not properly identify misconduct, which would have required an investigation. They put a Karen in charge of deciding when that investigation should be triggered, and as a consequence, an investigation ended up being the first thing carried out by opposing counsel. That is bad. Now, I've been calling Karen a Karen this whole time, because that's some Karening she got up to when she allowed Creepo to keep sexually harassing teenagers. But here's the thing. Remember when I said, in the moment, people can get all turned around? Well, it turns out that Karen herself claimed that she had been sexually harassed by Tony Stark. In fact, she even filed a lawsuit about it after Tony Stark fired her. So of all the people who should have known to stand up for Kate and Kat, you'd think that Karen would have been the one. But she wasn't. For whatever reason, in that moment, she dismissed their allegations. So, pulling it all together, I said I'd be talking about a framework. And I said we can laugh at people who ram their organization into the Athenosphere. But these mistakes are common, and they're surprising when you learn about the sort of people who make them. They're not all Karens, as I've been jokingly suggesting. So, how do you avoid horrific investigative blunders? Establish an investigative framework in your policy. Follow that framework. Your framework is going to need to define the kind of misconduct that requires an investigation. You can't rely on common sense for that. People make mistakes in the moment. And unfortunately, that list can't be exhaustive. People are endlessly inventive, but it should give a list of common examples and triggers at least. It also needs to define who is responsible for deciding if an investigation is triggered, and you need to make sure that person is qualified. Multiple reporting channels and decision makers here would not be remiss. Also, this part of the framework should define whether higher leadership should be notified and when it is time to contact your attorney. These frameworks also need to define who is responsible for conducting the investigation. This part is not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. It's going to have to be nuanced. So, for example, if a woman alleges she was harassed by her male supervisor, she may be more comfortable talking to another woman about the misconduct versus someone who resembles her offender. There are also cultural considerations. For those of you who are in international contexts, your investigator will need to understand the cultures they are investigating. And there may be occasions, such as misconduct on the part of leadership, which require an outside investigator. And as a quick aside, this should go without saying, but this is stupid things, so I'm going to say it anyway. Your investigator should really not be someone who may be involved as a witness. That is just problems all around. Finally, your investigative framework should talk about what the investigation is seeking to discover. By this, I mean it needs to have a general roadmap and a plan for reaching conclusions. It should talk about the kind of evidence you're looking for, the kind of documents that need to be reviewed, the kind of people you want to talk to. You don't want to be trying to figure this all out in the moment as you're dealing with potentially traumatized people. So, in conclusion, I'm going to reiterate. In the moment, people make mistakes. Horrible, tragic mistakes. So you need to clearly define an investigative framework in your policy. Clearly defining things, spelling them out, and making sure people are trained on policy can help you avoid mistakes like what happened at IHop in Wisconsin. What I've talked about so far is a starting point. If you haven't done this, you have a lot of work to do with legal counsel. Thanks for listening. David Seibotham, signing off.